News site AtlantaFalcons.com discussed the status of the NFC South division, and whether Derek Carr would be able to change the dynamic, in its Friday edition. With just one game left in the NFL season, the Super Bowl is about to begin, with Sunday's game between the Eagles and Chiefs promising to be an exciting one. That's when negotiations could intensify over contracts for current Atlanta Falcons players. Then we have free agency and the draft a few weeks later. After all these events, the Atlanta Falcons team should look very different from the current one. We'll explore your questions about what the team could do in this Friday's edition of Bair Mail. Anthony White of Greensboro, Tennessee/Augusta, Georgia, you mentioned the possibility of bringing in another runner during the holiday season. Cordarrelle Patterson has been excellent for the team, but he is getting older and has suffered from some injuries. Do you think it's a good idea to draft another young star like Tyler Allgeier, or bring in another free agent like Damien Williams like the Falcons tried to do last season? You brought up an interesting point here, Anthony. Many don't consider the runner's position to be a critical need, but on closer inspection, it may be important on some level. The team has a solid defense, with Tyler Allgeier standing out as a real threat with 3 touchdowns in the second half of the season. It was nice to see his talent recognized in the league, coming in 5th in the voting for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Allgeier will allow Cordarrelle Patterson to move more into the outside game and exploit opponent vulnerabilities. This should help improve receiver performance. Also, let's remember that CP is capable of being a strong runner between tackles when he's healthy. The key is to keep it that way. Coming back to Anthony's point, Caleb Huntley suffered an Achilles tendon injury near the end of the season. It's a long recovery. It is unclear if he will return at the start of the season or if he will have the same explosiveness as before. It may be necessary to look for another option, especially considering how often the Falcons run with the ball. While part of this was driven by the need to overcome difficulties on defense, the team needs to move forward first. I think it would be a good idea to draft another player or look for another option on the free market, like a veteran player on a trial deal. But it can be difficult to find someone who will accept a third-runner role in a trial deal. Dylan, you brought up an important question about the Falcons' best player available, BPA, draft strategy. I agree that the strategy of selecting the best player available is a solid approach to long-term team building. When it comes to specific picks this year, I think the selection will be between Stroud, Young, Carter and Anderson Jr. I say you choose BPA and enjoy the capital of choice. As for Barry Wynn's question about trading to someone other than quarterback, I only think that's possible if you're interested in a quarterback. However, I think this is an unlikely scenario. Finally, I agree that pass rushers are plentiful and that it's possible to get a good one or two without having to give up future capital. If I were the GM, I would expect other teams to trade and push Tyree Wilson or Myles Murphy or the best cornerback in the draft to me. Bill Witten from Killen, Alabama wrote. In response to question of the week on what the Falcons' most pressing defensive need is, there's a possibility to sign James Bradberry and Darren Payne in free agency and Myles Murphy in the draft. Would I be willing to spend my budget and the first round of the draft on this scenario? Bill responds, I wouldn't want to give James Bradberry a very long contract, but I would be willing to invest in a 2-year deal at a premium price, along with a big investment in Darren Payne. I also really like Myles Murphy or Tyree Wilson if he drops to number 8. The idea is to complement with players like Kentavious Street and build a solid defensive line. He also mentions that there are some interesting inside line options in free agency and that this would be a good place to spend money. Additionally, he supports the idea of adding depth from veteran cornerbacks to complement A.J. Terrell and Casey Hayward. However, he points out that it's important to avoid long-term cornerback investments, considering Terrell is about to get a big extension. Mas sobre o texto original necessário fornecer o texto original para ver mais informações sobre a trajetória.